Councilman Benjamin Flores, and I'm the Democratic nominee for Texas Land Commissioner. I'm a big fan of Progress Texas. Honestly, it's the voice of that energy that is currently moving, that is making Texas Democrats passionate.
It's Monday, July 6, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions through our no-paywall podcasts and digital media. We reach millions of Texans monthly, and that's made possible by folks like you who invest in independent progressive media by Texans for Texans. Huge thanks to Scott Sisk, Will Judy, and Franziska Nicholson for their ongoing sustaining support. Much appreciated. Two moves made over the holiday weekend by Governor Greg Abbott demonstrate the arrogance of the Texas Republican Party, both in terms of their estimation of their Democratic opposition and their callous, entitled handling of our elections process, in which the confidence of the public appears to mean close to nothing. Governor Greg Abbott has committed an egregious subversion of Democratic norms by appointing far-right Republican nominee Don Huffines to lead the Texas Comptroller's office before a single general election vote is cast. Benjamin Werman, Isaac Yu, and Allison Ackerman at the Houston Chronicle say acting comptroller Kelly Hancock's abrupt resignation last Wednesday was immediately followed by Huffines' appointment, a unilateral move by the governor that rewards a man who's not won an election for a public office in over a decade with the immense perks of incumbency just months before the November election, effectively transforming a vital and powerful public post into a taxpayer-funded campaign vehicle. And conveniently for the Texas Republican machine, all at a moment when GOP midterm election prospects are as dim as they've been in multiple decades. As you know, Don Huffines is currently facing Democratic State Senator Sarah Eckhart of Austin in the general election for comptroller, but in this case, Abbott has chosen to sidestep the voters of Texas entirely, predetermining the leadership of the state treasury to advance his own political agenda. The legal mechanics driving this appointment reveal how easily the state executive branch can bypass the democratic process. Under Article 4, Section 12 of the Texas Constitution, the governor possesses the authority to fill vacancies in state and district offices, including the comptroller, when the legislature is not in session. And Kelly Hancock's abrupt and generally unexplained departure last week conveniently creates such a vacancy. However, while technically permitted under letter of the law, using this mechanism to appoint an active partisan candidate for that exact office violates the spirit of a fair election. By installing Huffines, Governor Abbott creates a situation where an unelected candidate wields administrative authority, manages public funds, and commands media attention as the sitting officeholder while actively seeking election to that very post. The political arrogance of Governor Abbott in making this appointment is staggering, even by his own well-established standards. By forcing Don Huffines upon Texas, Governor Abbott has displayed a profound contempt for the Texas electorate, signaling that the choices of voters are secondary to his own executive priorities. It's also a blatant attempt to insulate Huffines from the public condemnation he's deservedly receiving for having quietly bought one of Jeffrey Epstein's most notorious crime scenes, the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. As we've talked about, the Office of the Comptroller wields enormous independent financial power, far beyond what most Texans realize. This appointment hands Don Huffines control over a massive state apparatus, the management of the collection of state taxes, oversight of the state's economic stabilization fund, and a great degree of control over state spending. Let's also note that the Comptroller's office is currently tasked with rolling out the state's private school voucher scam, a key policy priority for Governor Abbott, now under the control of an unelected GOP candidate. What's more, Huffines is also now authorized to spend public money on marketing and advertising for the voucher program, handing him a taxpayer-funded megaphone to boost his own public profile during peak campaign season. In other words, your Texas tax dollars will now subsidize Don Huffines' campaign for comptroller. Is it legal? Well, of course it is. This is Texas. But legal or not, it's also a brazen disregard for ethical governance and democratic principles in Texas. And meanwhile, there's more. Progressive watchdogs concerned about Governor Abbott's inside meddling with our elections process, almost a guarantee given their slimmer than usual odds in 2026, have been watching the situation with the Texas Secretary of State's office cautiously since the sudden announcement by that office's most recent occupant, Jane Nelson, of her largely unexplained resignation a few weeks ago. The immediate speculation that Christian nationalist crusader, state rep, and noted election denier Nate Schatzline might be Abbott's pick for that top post, key to the oversight and administration of the November midterm election. And that speculation is starting to look pretty prescient. Aaron Torres and Sarah Bahari at the Dallas Morning News say Schatzline, who has publicly held fast to his belief that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump, has been tapped to lead election policy as a senior advisor to Governor Abbott, who, in tandem with the Huffines appointment, has accelerated a chilling escalation in the right-wing assault on democratic norms by placing a steadfast election denier and wild-eyed religious zealot into a key role over Texas's election apparatus. Not only does Nate Schatzline bring a fresh dose of toxic ideological extremism to the governor's team, he also brings a complete lack of experience in election administration. Unlike seasoned civil servants who understand the complex logistics of managing precincts and running tabulators and securing ballots, Nate Schatzline has never administered a single election. He has zero practical knowledge regarding the rigorous and super complex protocols that keep Texas voting secure, and is thus completely unqualified to oversee policy for a state with 30 million residents. His sole credential appears to be his unyielding loyalty to the MAGA movement's most destructive conspiracy theories and religious crusades. Nate Schatzline has repeatedly and explicitly amplified the thoroughly debunked lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump, claiming without a single shred of evidence that election fraud is rampant. On right-wing podcasts and from stages in churches and otherwise across the country, he has insisted that massive mail-in ballot fraud is not even debatable, willfully ignoring the extensive audits, machine hand counts, and federal court rulings that have firmly validated the 2020 results and Joe Biden's victory. There are few Texas politicians more directly and publicly tied to the Christian nationalist movement than Nate Schatzline, a former leader at Fort Worth's notorious Mercy Culture Church, who as a state lawmaker has spent a lot of time picking on trans kids and drag performers, and both inside and outside the Capitol has made it his very vocal mission to mobilize churches for what he calls civic reformation, in other words, the imposition of Christian doctrine upon the rest of us, and to develop and train candidates similarly dedicated to infusing biblical values into government policy. Nate Schatzline sees American politics as a spiritual battleground. He once led a Capitol worship session declaring that the legislative body itself literally belongs to Jesus. Nate Schatzline is engaged in what he sees as a holy war against anyone not in lockstep with his own religious agenda. And Governor Abbott has just placed him in a primary role overseeing the November election in Texas. By elevating an unqualified conspiracy theorist and American theocracy enthusiast to a position as a senior elections advisor, Governor Abbott is either oblivious to or is moving to actively, intentionally undermine public trust in Texas elections ahead of the midterm. Schatzline has already begun signaling his intent to push for radical changes, including a deeply unpopular effort to close Texas's open primaries, which would strip millions of independent Texas voters of a voice in that all-important election phase. Governor Abbott's willingness to give a key platform to someone who rejects the bedrock principles of American democracy proves that this administration is not about the professional, secure, and fair execution of our elections process. Rather, it's about all-out partisan warfare. By the way, Secretary of State Jane Nelson is still technically in play. Michael Shapiro at the Houston Chronicle says Nelson is now reportedly reconsidering her resignation, which was to take effect on July 17th, 1 week from this upcoming Friday. The Schatzline scenario is rumored by the Quorum Report's Scott Braddock to have deeply unsettled Nelson, who, while generally a reliable Republican workhorse, has also been praised for her bipartisan work ethic and was confirmed to her current job by a fully unanimous Senate vote. We could see some intrigue over the next few days. Should Jane Nelson decide not to quit after all, there's very little the governor can technically do about it. Under Article 15, Section 9 of the Texas Constitution, Senate-confirmed appointees can only be removed with the consent of 2/3 of the Senate, which would not only require a special legislative session, but would also require at least 3 Democratic senators to vote in favor of firing Jane Nelson. We're definitely watching that one. Hit the website to snag the merch to match your progressive values. Our web store is up and running now at ProgressTexas.org with our newly released Humans Against Abbott, Y'all Means All, and Resist shirts, stickers, and buttons. Hit the web store at ProgressTexas.org to support your favorite podcast network today. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Monday, July 6, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. When lives in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks for listening. Have a terrific day and a great week, and we'll see you again here tomorrow morning.